Good morning, everyone. Fantastic to see you all. My name is Rich Sawyer, and thank you for attending the session today on driving improvement and measuring the impact of change. And we've got a really exciting session today. Been working closely with this team over the last couple of months as well, so I'm really excited to see what they're bringing to us today. So joining us will be Scott Hodgson, Head of Clinical Accounting and Costing at Nottingham University Hospitals. We've got Richard Smith, Deputy Programme Director of Transformation. And we've got two clinicians joining us. So Liz Crease, who's Chief Scientist and Clinical Director of Science and Technology at NUH, and Milan Savani as well, a respiratory consultant at the Trust. So I'll let Richard talk you through the WAVE programme in a second, which is we're going to sort of understand the process and talk about some other bits and pieces there. But for those of you who don't know me, I work for One NHS Finance, specifically the Finance Innovation Forum. And as part of our work, we've produced the EVO framework, which is this book here. And essentially, it seeks to help NHS Trust teams improve patient care at the system level by initially sort of starting driving evidence-driven, value-based decisions and at specialty and service level. So it's free of charge, it's NHS owned and awarded to trusts on application. And using the handbook, you will use your existing operational, clinical, project improvement and finance staff to collaborate to identify opportunities, evidence the need for change, and across 3 services over 20 weeks, you'll implement those improvements. Now, it's a fully internal process. There's no external consultants or anyone involved. We're here to help you remotely understand them and essentially to drive and measure clinical transformations independently. For the first time, teams can assess the impact of these changes through a value-based lens, which is going to become and is becoming critically important as we move forward. Now, this will combine quality and cost into a unified metric, which we're calling the Value Impact Comparison Score, or VIC score for short. And the principle of the EVO framework and all of the deliverables baked into this, a lot of this has come from the fantastic work that the NUH WAVE programme have trailblazed over the last few years. It's been fantastic to see their work, and also I'm pleased to be able to say that we'll be producing the first ever VIC score and sharing that with you hopefully today in this presentation. So we're going to be looking at 3 services, respiratory, sterile services and vascular, and I'm on the edge of my seat for this one. So Richard, if I could pass over to you to talk a bit more about the WAVE programme, that would be fantastic.
All right, thank you for that, and thank you for that introduction. And it's been great working with you over the past couple of years to get us to the stage we've got to at the moment. Okay, so just to give you a little introduction to what WAVE is. WAVE stands for Working to Achieve Value and Excellence, and we've been running this program within NUH for about 6 years at the moment. Its purpose really is to support specialties in identifying and scoping projects to cover the strategic goals of the organisation, both from an operational, a patient risk, and ultimately from a finance perspective. So it's a value-based, collaborative approach that we work with our clinicians on, and it's massively data-driven, and it's evidence-based, and making sure that we deal with the QI and the waste reduction as we go through each of the specialties. It's a 17-week process, and we've got 3 program leads, so we aim to do 9 specialties a year. And the core representation within those groups from a specialty element will be the head of service and the matron and the special general manager or the assistant general manager. And then a core corporate representation will be the program lead itself, somebody from Scott's team who will be on the call from a Plix perspective, and then a finance representative and a data analyst. And we also bring in anybody who we need to as part of the program moving forward. So whether it's coding, commissioning, or anybody. It's a 3-stage process. So we go through a data cleanse for 6 to 7 weeks, and we'll go on to those slides. Another 6 to 7 weeks from a QI and a waste perspective, and then the last 3 weeks are planning. And we have 2 approvals processors going through the process with the divisional leadership teams from a kind of check and challenge perspective. And the final check and challenge is with the exec team. And then obviously it's clinical led and it's exec supported. Next slide, please. So from a data challenge perspective, this is the first 6 to 7 weeks. And what we do is try to combine all the data analysis on the specialties, work with the senior clinicians, and create a bit bespoke dashboard at the end of that 6 weeks to show the data in a way that makes sense to that specialty. So it's a 2-way process, really. So we give them a pack at the start of the wave, which shows all the external benchmarking information and all the internal PLIX information we've got on that specialty. And we do a kind of comply or explain with this. And so if the data looks fine and the specialty agrees with it, we find a way to comply with that and get down to the benchmarks. If there's a reason why the data is incorrect or they can't meet the benchmarks, that's a kind of explanation, and we can work through that as well. And then because the specialties know their work much better than we do, they have the internal knowledge of how the service really works. And so we work with them not just from a data perspective, from a benchmarking and internal PLIX way, but they tell us what does work, and we try to use the data within the PLIX system to prove or disprove those theories. Next slide, please. This is a data brief cycle. I'm going to ask Scott just to come in for this slide, please, because he can explain this better from a PLIX element.
Thanks, Richard. So I'm Scott Hodgson. I'm Head of Clinical Accounting and Costing Transformation at NUH. As Richard said, we work with the specialty for the first 6 weeks of the session of the WAVE program, and we go through this what we call the data cleanse period, and we use the PLIX data with the specialty, and there's a lot of people that sort of say, well, why do you spend so much time doing data cleanse at the start, as part of a 17-week process? This is the important bit where we actually get the engagement of clinicians. We know that we're dealing with information that isn't 100% accurate. There's always issues with some of the data, and this is sort of a safe session to have that discussion around, well, what do we think is good? What could we improve? How can you help us improve that information? We do some training around how information gets into the systems and how we can change it. And what we do over that 6-week period is we listen to the specialty and we take feedback from the specialty, and we actually change the information either in the source system or in the PLIX system, so we can start using that information, and we build a dashboard with the specialty that they own. So what we get is, like, initially, yeah, the data's wrong. This consultant doesn't work for my specialty, or this consultant left 2 years ago, or these clinic codes are down as the wrong consultant, and we can start to change that, and we do that in that sort of 6-week period, so clinicians can see those changes happening, and that's where we start to get the hook. What we do with a lot of specialties as well is ask them if they've got any more information that they can give us to make the data richer. I think that happened with one of the specialties today, sterile services. We now get much richer information, having gone through the WAVE program for our PLIX system, than we did before we went into the process. So we've got that sort of 6 weeks. We can get through to that resolution stage where there's acceptance that the data is not 100% correct, but we can work with it to make decisions. And at the end of it, we leave the specialty with a bespoke dashboard that is there for them to use for the rest of the WAVE program. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Scott. And so once we've got to that stage where we put the data in a way that the specialties understand and can work with, we then move on to the next stage, which is the QI and WAVE stage. and we normally spend again about 6 or 7 weeks going through this. And that's picking out probably 8 or 10 projects that come out of the data that we can work on, but then prioritizing those to probably 3 or 4 because of everything that's going off at the moment. Specialty's a bit busy, so doing extra projects on top of that it is tough. So we've tried to limit that to probably 3 or 4 projects. Within each of those projects, then we spend 6 to 7 weeks doing the normal things you'd expect in a QI and waste project. So looking at process mapping, looking at issue trees, doing things like the 5 whys, the Timwoods waste, we look at all that. And then we also look at best practice, not just from a Girth perspective, but what's happening in the rest of the country and in the rest of the world. Next slide, please. And then the final stage is the planning stage. And so once we've identified what the 3 or 4 priorities are, and we've worked through that, going from a kind of current stage to a future stage model, we can then look at what that means. And so the kind of so what bit in terms of clinical outcomes, patient experience, and patient safety, but we can also put a financial number at the end of that too. And so this is the value calculation that Rich talked about at the start. And we will be going through that in the next couple of slides in terms of sterile services and respiratory. So I'll leave that to later. Next slide, please. We always use this as part of WAVE. So WAVE, again, started 6 to 8 years ago, and we always went in with a financial angle to start off with. So specialties, can you find us 10% of your budget within 2 years? Once we got to the stage of understanding our data and really getting those low-hanging fruits in the first few years, everything became a lot harder. And so now we've gone to for the last 4 or 5 years, really, making sure that the emphasis is on improving the quality of the patient pathway, and then the finance drops out of that. Next slide, please. So what's working well? Obviously, we now recognise as best practice, and the way we're doing with Rich in moving it forward with Evo. We have huge clinical buy-in. We've got 2 of the clinicians on the call today. We did a presentation the other month to Dartford where we had 3 clinicians on the call, which were different to the 2 on the call today. So we have a list of clinicians who's been through WAVE, understand it, and can talk about it in the way that we do. We've got lots of success around the so what. So from a financial point of view, we've saved tens of millions over the past 6 years. Team working and connectivity across the trust. So where we work in services which require them connecting with other services, we do that well during the WAVE. And then this next bit around development of the prioritization tool and the now, next, later, never methodology. Again, we'll come on to that in the next couple of slides. Next slide, please. And then just some evaluation work. So this is the last 18 services we've worked on. It's a bit small to read, but it's essentially we ask the same questions at the start of the WAVE and the end of the WAVE. And so there'll be things like how well do you understand your financial performance? How well do you understand PLICs? How well do you understand waste and quality improvement? And you can see from this graph that it's always substantially higher at the end of the WAVE to the start. Next slide, please. So moving on to the case studies. So Liz is going to take you through the work we've done on sterile services, which we finished at the end of September this year. Milind is then going to take you through the respiratory WAVE, which finished in 2002, and so we can do the Vic score for that. And then I'm quickly going to go through the vascular, which again ended in October. So I'm going to hand over to Liz, who is going to take you through the sterile services WAVE.
Thanks, Richard. Could I have the next slide, please? So yeah, I'm Liz Crees. I'm Chief Scientist at NUH, but I'm also Clinical Director for Science and Technology, which is where Sterile Services sits. So just to give you a little bit of background, Sterile Services process surgical equipment for about 70 theatres spread across both the City and the QMC campuses. And NUH is a major trauma centre, a neurosurgical centre, and has been investing in robotic surgery, so where the robotic instruments require specialist decontamination treatment. So there's quite a busy acute trust. The department processes around 15,000 separate items each month, which means that there's an average of 570 instrument trays sterilised each day. And the trays are customised to different specialty requirements, and some complex trays can have over 100 instruments within them. So prior to the WAVE programme, the team were often running with a large, and I mean several days, backlog of work. And this led to frustrations from the clinical specialties and the need to often fast track equipment for planned surgery, leading to inefficiencies. And there were also difficulties with availability and return of loan kits for complex surgery, leading to financial penalties as well. And then in addition to the problems with processes, the estate is ageing and cramped, so it hasn't really kept pace with the expansion of theatre capacity, and there are limited options for outsourcing. And where we were beginning to look at WAVE at the beginning of this year, there had been no team leader for the department for nearly 2 years. And we also knew that we had cultural issues within the team as well. Sterile Services does have a comprehensive tracking and traceability system in place, but they lack the resources to fully utilise that. So prior to WAVE programme, there were lots of problems to unpick. And for me as clinical director, I really wanted the help in persuading the team that there were alternative ways to ease the pressure other than providing more staff, more space and more equipment. So could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So, and I do realise this is a really busy slide, I am sorry. So the WAVE programme ran in Sterile Services over the summer. And we were lucky that we had some extra lead-in time from a previous WAVE programme in theatres who were one of our main customers. So we did start with a number of possible work streams, some of which had some limited work up at the beginning and when they're parked. And we also started from a position of limited data and no really previous data analysis had gone on. So it was quite a slow start for WAVE in Sterile Services, which was actually probably a good thing, given the background factors that I've already outlined. What we've done though since WAVE finished was to use this value prioritisation tool to look back at Sterile Services and try to assess whether we made the right decisions on which work streams to work with, and if we had access to this tool at the beginning, whether it would have helped us to prioritise the work. So it is a really busy slide, I am sorry, but I wanted to give you an overview of the type of value criteria and metrics that we've used for Sterile Services and how they've been assigned to both quality and resource components. So if I can have the next slide, please. Thank you. So just to sort of illustrate this more clearly, I've taken that first component, clinical outcomes, just so we can describe that in more detail. So you can see here we've defined 4 different value criteria and assigned a metric to each one. So to talk about surgical instrument availability, really we tend to talk about where we don't meet this. So this probably leads to the most complaints from our customers. So this is a measure that we should have the right instruments in the right place and in the right state at the right time. So in a way it's measuring the uptime where surgeries are not delayed or cancelled due to instrument issues. The turnaround time for sterilisation is the most familiar criteria in use prior to WAVE, albeit measured in days by dates on dirty tray racks stacked outside the department, rather than actually by using that traceability and tracking system to look at the date and time of when an instrument was used in surgery. The best way to illustrate the next criteria, the impact on surgical outcomes, is to think about the transmission of CJD, so Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, via reusable surgical instruments. So obviously an extremely rare occurrence, with only a handful of cases ever reported, but serious enough that neurosurgical instruments used for surgery on anyone born after 1996, so those who are at low risk of developing CJD, are kept and processed completely separately from other instruments. So quite a difficult thing to measure, but really important. And then the capacity to handle increased demand looks at both the ability of the service to cope with additional work from planned year-on-year increases in activity, and also to deal with those peaks in demand from things like waiting list initiatives, so something like a Super Saturday surgical list. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So again, a really busy slide. But here we've got a matrix with the different work stream options across the top of the slide, and then the value components down the side of the slide. And each value metric has then been scored from 1 to 5 for each option that we considered within the WAVE programme. And this is based on how much value we thought could be generated within that criteria. So this is quite a subjective process. And again, we've looked back at sterile services after the WAVE programme has been completed. But I do really like this ability to have a heat map of all the possible workstream opportunities at a glance. So during our WAVE programme, we did concentrate on the first 5 options shown on this matrix. So it was a relief to find out that we managed to rank them as the top 5 options here as well. But we did spend some significant time in the first sort of 4 to 6 weeks of the programme, prior to that first check and challenge review, working up some of the other options, including, for example, looking at option 7, the organisational structure review. So with the benefits of hindsight, if I'd seen this heat map and the rankings prior to starting WAVE, then we wouldn't have looked at probably anything beyond option 5 within the programme. And again, with the benefit of hindsight, we would probably have considered more options within the WAVE programme, because we were starting from a place where there'd been no analysis of what little data had been available. So we were casting quite a wide net originally, just to see what we could work on. If you look at the heat map though, it's really easy to see visually that the opportunities lie in options 1 to 3. So I won't go into all the detail at the bottom of the slide, unless Richard or Scott particularly want to go into that. But just wanted to mention that the time realisation factor here helps to sort the options into now, next, later, or even never. So really, again, to help that time prioritisation piece. Could we move on to the next slide, please? So this slide then shows a slightly different visual way to look at where the high value, low risk options are that we should be prioritising during the WAVE programme. So these are the now opportunities, and where the next, later, or never options sit. So the blue circle here represents option 3, which was looking at demand and capacity, which was really our main opportunity within this programme. And then options 1 and 2, which were grip control of loan kits and tray rationalisation, are shown by the red and orange circles just underneath. So if I could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I just wanted to summarise by going over some of the things that we've learned through WAVE, and through using the prioritisation tool, and what we do differently another time. So sterile services is a costly service where there are significant opportunities to improve production and processes. And one of the key benefits that I found from the WAVE programme has been the data analysis provided and how the service has then been able to use this to prioritise workload going forward. We had an ambition at the start of the programme, I think, to tackle everything, and the use of this value prioritisation tool at the beginning of WAVE would have really helped to sort those options into now, next and later. So we did end up focusing on the first 5 options shown, but again, if the benefit of hindsight, if we'd used the value prioritisation tool prior to WAVE, we would probably have really focused our efforts on those first 3 key priorities and really, concentrated on doing those well. And then finally, just for me, one of the key learning outcomes following WAVE is how we keep that momentum going and how we ensure that those improvements are sustainable. So we've been in discussion with the Trust Transformation team to provide ongoing support, but we've also talked about ensuring staff within the services are trained in improvement methodologies prior to going through a WAVE programme again. So thank you, that's my slides.
Thanks, Liz, for a very clear explanation of the process, and of course to Richard and Scott for explaining the process in detail. So I'm Milind Sovni, I'm one of the respiratory consultants. I'm lead clinician for acute non-invasive ventilation. I'm also visiting professor at Derby University. What I will be talking about is the respiratory case study focusing on improving delivery of non-invasive ventilation, particularly at City campus. So again, talking about the slide that we have got in front of us, this is a very busy slide. Apologies. Again, it's a heat map, and what it does, it has scored 9 options that were looked at when it comes to outcomes and resources. So looking at the value and risk really, and I think it's not projecting quite as well. My sincere apologies for that. But what I can say is that the first option, which is on the left hand side, it is the non-invasive ventilation service. And you can see that it has also got the highest risk score as well. The reason for that is that although on the Queen's campus of NUH, we had very good delivery of non-invasive ventilation and one of the best outcomes across the country, on the City campus, it wasn't quite as good. So the GOV process had identified this as something that needs to be looked into because of high risk of poor outcomes, which were slightly worse than the national average. So we are, so after this process, looking at the heat map, looking at data, and importantly, looking at our ability to deliver, we decided to go ahead with the List 2 NIV project. Next slide, please. So, so as you know, when we look at outcomes, Liz has in detail explained what the outcome measures are, and when we looked at the care outcomes, I think this is where I wanted to focus a bit more time. So what was happening is that we had significantly higher mortality on the City campus. The reason for this was patients would come into our admissions unit, and then there was a huge delay in recognize and rescue in terms of identifying which patients need non-invasive ventilation. Patients would then go on to different wards from the admissions unit where staff with variable experience in delivering ventilation would set these people up on ventilator via a mask. We also had issues in terms of the so there was issue in terms of recognize and rescue, issue in terms of getting access to various beds, issue in terms of staff training, and also we had issue with the quality of the equipment that was available. So when we looked at this, we then changed the whole process. We sort of said, okay, anybody who comes to assessment unit, from there, they will go only to one ward, which is the Lister 2 facility, which will be designated NIV facility at city campus. What it meant is that patients then would come to the same place. Our nurses would get more and more experience. We could install higher quality of ventilators, which were sort of modern ventilators, which were able to deliver as per the national guidance and more actually. And of course, we did training for staff as well as for junior doctors. The other important thing that we did was we worked with critical care outreach team so that patients who were admitted to the admission unit would be set up and transferred with the critical care outreach team to the ward, and patients who were already admitted in other wards in the hospital, if they are poorly and need an IV support, critical care outreach team would go and set them up and bring them to Lister 2 facility. Importantly, we also developed a monitoring system. So we have now got central monitoring available on Lister 2 for our NIV beds, so our nurses can keep an eye on patients who are particularly unwell. These are the sickest patients on the campus and they do need extra care. So we worked on 9 parameters, starting from recognize rescue to staff training, to equipment, to identifying a process and pathway, to training of wider doctors and nurses so that people are aware as to whom to contact in hours, whom to contact out of hours, how to get the patient to their destination, and how to set up. As a result of that, we have reduced our mortality, which was more than 30% a couple of years ago. In the latest audit, it has come down to 15%, which has been a big improvement. I'm really proud to say that. And this has been a teamwork. And although we as doctors sometimes like to think that we achieve things and we deliver things, it's not wrong. I think medicine is becoming more and more a team sport, and we might say somebody needs something, but it's the nursing team who actually deliver it. So getting the nursing team buying into this, really getting their ambitions high, getting them enthused about it, has been a key, I think, to our success. Also, the next step is the timely intervention. So initially, after somebody's carbon dioxide would be noticed to be very high, it would take hours and hours for them to actually receive non-invasive ventilation, which is a life-saving treatment. So we had reduced it from 9 hours to 3 hours, and our latest data show that it has come down to less than 2 hours now. But this has been a long, hard process, which is going on for last sort of 2 and a bit years. And we have worked very closely with Richard and Scott and team to get where we are. So patient experience, again, talking about, so again, by recognizing patient deterioration early, we were able to give patients treatment earlier, get them better quicker, which of course, understandably, will make people more appreciative. And the other important thing has been to establish a pathway after consultation with all the stakeholders, advertise it repeatedly. So not only for doctors, but as I said again, in the ward managers meeting, band 6 meeting, we routinely have this pathway discussed. And again, at the start of last winter and the start of this winter, we highlighted the process, tweaked things as need be. And what is clear to me is that although we have achieved good success, it's really important that we keep the process going so that we don't slide back. because we get new nurses and new junior doctors starting every sort of 6 monthly or yearly. And it's important that they are kept up to date with the process, so that particularly out of hours, any patients who need treatment, they don't get any lesser of a service. Next slide, please. So I think safety and quality. So I think I have already touched on this. Staff training has been absolutely the key, and initially you could see that the staff were slightly hesitant, and it is really heartening to see how their confidence is getting better, how they feel more and more comfortable, and also they are taking pride in their achievements, really. And central monitoring, again, this has come through the WAVE process, where we looked at the value added part of the project and the resources, and this has allowed us to keep an eye on patients quicker, which means that if patients are if patients are getting unwell, then we can pick them up quicker. We can get senior input for those patients quicker. And the ventilator technology, so Neon Coding, what we did is not only just for the Lister 2, but for all the critical care areas in the hospital, including critical care and surgical high dependency, we got same ventilator as well as emergency department. So our training, our governance process become much sleeker, and transferring patients from one area to another, because they all share same ventilator, then it becomes a lot easier. And then the important thing about the finances. So as a part of this, we can now, because we have implemented all the steps that are essential, we are able to claim tariff through CCMDS. And so there is a commission tariff, and it's recorded via SLAM. So that has had a significant impact in terms of on the financial side of upwards of $1 million. Next slide, please. So going through the quality assessment. So on left hand side, you've got outcomes, experience, and safety. And when we look, the original pathway, which is scored in red, so you can see the original pathway scored pretty poorly. Estimated pathway and the transformed pathway, actually, as you can see, in the transformed pathway, our mortality rate, we have achieved 5, and NIV weaning success, actually we have exceeded our estimated pathway expectation. So there has been a big improvement. Of course, there are still some areas where our quality aspiration is 5 throughout, and there are some 3s and 4s that we will need to continue to work on, particularly looking at the readmission rate, because this population that we look after are often frail COPD patients, where readmission is an important issue. We are also taking part in a national research project called EPIC High Flow, where we are looking at use of high flow in community to try and reduce readmissions in these patients. And then the safety component, I'm happy to say that safety component has done significantly better as well. So overall total weighting, as you can see, for the quality assessment is 80%, and we are scoring pretty well. Next slide, please. This is again a slightly busy slide, but what I wanted to highlight here is that we have actually calculated the value impact comparison, or the VIC score. So you can see the outcomes and experience and safety, which is 80%. So when we have looked at quality, our quality score has improved from 1.4 to 5.4, and the weighted quality score, the maximum can be 80%, has improved from 28% to 67%. When we look at resources, particularly because of improved ability to get CCMDF tariff for the providing non-invasive ventilation, we have had a significant improvement in the resources and the value. So what it means is the value score has improved in total from 28 to 87%. So that's an improvement of 59-60%. I mean, it's a huge improvement. Of course, there is still room for improvement, but I think we have done pretty well here in terms of getting where we are. But we cannot rest on our laurels. The other important thing I wanted to highlight is, by this, what it has allowed us is to contain all the non-invasive ventilation, or most of it, within the respiratory medicine, and it has allowed critical care more beds, so that they can then carry on with either elective work or cancer surgery or looking after other trauma patients or whatever. So we have in the process helped out other departments as well, which is really an important point to note. Next slide, please. I think that's where I sort of move off and let Richard and team to come in again. Thank you.
Milind, and thank you, Liz, for that. The WAVE program is great in terms of its process, but as all these programs, it needs the people taking part in it to really throw themselves into it and put all the effort into it. And as you've seen through the last two ones, that Liz and Milind did that to get some great outcomes, not just from an operational and a patient perspective, but that did lead to financial outcomes at the end of it, which is great. I'm just going to quickly run through the last one in terms of vascular surgery, just to show you the process from start to finish. So Scott's team, in terms of PLIX, pulled together some information on vascular surgery. It showed that we had an issue with the length of stay, and more importantly, from a non-elective pathway, we were doing a lot more activity non-elective than we should be doing elective if we looked at benchmark, and I think there was something like 20% more activity from a non-elective pathway perspective, and we were losing 1.5 million from the PLIX data, which was April to March. Next slide, please. So again, went through a case study perspective, and then looked at the opportunities. There were 5 projects we could have picked. We nailed them down to 3, with one of them being the focus on the non-elective pathway, which was the first one on the slide, which came out as a rank 1. Next slide, please. And what that meant, again, just linking to my earlier slide, that if we got the patient pathway right, we were able to reduce the patient risk that we had within the trust, which was a 25 down to 15. We were able to free up 2 beds from a length of stay perspective, because these patients were coming in and waiting for their operation, where we were able to put them onto a virtual ward and therefore save 2 beds. And if we take the cost of a bed at probably £100,000 a year, that's another £200,000 on top from a financial perspective. The main bit, we were able to avoid surgeries, and so 24 patients didn't have major limb amputations, and that's what we're looking to do over the next few years as well. And by getting all that right, we were able to put just over £2.5 million into the financial plan from a ERF perspective, because we were transferring non-elective patients into planned elective. And so again, doing the right thing by the patient and doing the right thing by the staff within the specialty always leads to a financial gain. That's the end of the slides. So I think it's Q&A now.